Hi, welcome to English Composition. I'm Michael Cheng. I'm here with Cher Chen.
各位同学，大家好，欢迎来到英文作文课程，我是 Cher。
Today we are working on Unit 11, and our topic is sentence patterns and sentence combining.
好，我们今天呢是要讲的是第11个单元啊，我们今天的主题是合并句子。
All right, and so today we are going to do an activity, and this activity is called sentence combining. And so in a sentence combining activity, we're going to take some short, simple sentence, and we will experiment with different ways of combining these sentences into longer and more complex sentences.
好，我们今天要做的练习呢，就是把简短的而且简单的句子合并起来变成一个较长的句子。那我们会一起来练习看看该如何去把句子做合并。
So now first, let's talk about why it's important to know how to combine short sentences into longer sentences.
好，首先呢，我们必须要先了解为什么我们需要把短的句子变成长的句子呢？
And the answer is that sentence combining can improve your writing by improving efficiency and also letting you have the ability to change the emphasis of your sentence.
好，那这个问题的答案呢是这样的：合并句子呢可以帮助你的写作更有效率，而且也可以帮助你去改变句子中所想要强调的一个重点。
All right, so let's do an example now. What we're going to do is take a look at this picture and make up some sentences about it.
好，我们现在来做个练习哦。我们接下来会看一下这张图片。我们那根据这张图片呢，我们来造一些句子来描述它。
And so this picture was taken by Dawn Allen, and then you can find this picture at the website that you see down at the bottom here.
好，这张图片呢，是从这个网址这个地方找出来的。那它是由 Dawn Allen 这一位摄影师所拍摄的。
All right, so now the first thing that we're going to do is, why don't we just make up a name for this person so that we know who we're talking about, and we can just give her a simple name like Annie.
好，我们首先要做的事情是帮这图片中的这位女孩取个名字。那我们就给她一个简单的名字，叫她做 Annie。
All right, so now let's make up some simple sentences about the person in the picture, and then the first sentence that I'll make up is just that Annie is a woman.
Okay, in my opinion, Annie is young.
Okay, and then when I look at this, I also see that I think Annie is pretty.
And another of my sentences would be Annie is blonde. OK， 好，我们刚刚呢造了4个句子关于这个照片中这位女孩 Annie。那我们发现她是一位漂亮的金发美女。
Right, and now let's talk about some other things that we can see. And I see that Annie is dressed like a witch.
And another sentence is Annie is wearing a black costume. 好，我们在接下来会发现呢Annie 图片中这位女孩她穿着黑色的衣服看起来就像一位女巫一样。
Right, and let me make up another sentence, and let's say Annie is carving a pumpkin.
And she's using a big knife to do that. So I would say Annie has a big knife.
Right, so now we have 8 sentences that describe this picture. And so let's take a look at this set of 8 sentences again.
好，我们刚刚总共造出了8个句子那让我们来看一下这8个句子。
So we can see, first of all, that the name Annie is repeated 8 times, and also the word is repeated 7 times.
好，我们首先就会发现名字Annie 已经重复了8次，那动词 it 重复了7次。
In addition, dressed and wearing are very similar concepts.
好，除此之外呢，你会发现 dressed 跟 wearing 这2个字的意思非常相似。
And so now, if we can cut down all this repetition, then our writing can become much more efficient.
好，那如果我们把这一些重复的地方呢，把它删除掉的话，这整个写作上面看起来就更有效率了。
So now let's take a look at the first 4 sentences.
好，我们首先先来看一下前4个句子。
So we can combine these 4 sentences together by only writing Annie and is one time.
好，我们可以把这4个句子做个合并我们把 Annie is 只写一次就好。
And so now let's use young, pretty, and blonde as adjectives before the noun, the word woman.
好，我们会看到呢young, pretty 跟 blonde 这3个形容词我们把它放到名词 woman 的前面。
And so now do you remember the correct order of adjectives that we learned about in Unit 5?
好，假设你还记得的话呢，我们在单元5里面就曾经学习过使用形容词的时候正确的排序方式。
And so first we have opinion adjectives before we write fact adjectives.
好，首先呢，我们会把看法形容词放在事实形容词的前面。
And for fact adjectives, age comes before color.
那对于事实形容词来说呢，年龄应该要出现在颜色形容词的前面。
So we can write this sentence: Annie is a pretty young blonde woman.
好，因此我们可以写出这个句子 ：Annie 是个漂亮年轻的金发女孩。
And so you can see here, we reduced the words we wrote from 13 words to 7 words, meaning we got rid of almost 50% of the words from our original sentence.
你可以发现呢，我们把句子的字数从13个字缩减到7个字，等于说我们利用把不需要的字删除的方式呢，减少了50%的用字，这让你的写作看起来更有效率。
All right. So now let's continue to combine our next two sentences together. We have Annie is dressed like a witch and Annie is wearing a black costume.
好，我们接下来把下面这两个句子把它做个合并。
And so we said earlier that dressing is a very similar idea to wearing, so we're going to make this sentence, Annie is wearing a black witch's costume.
好，我们稍早之前就提过 ，dressing 跟 wearing 的意思是相似的，所以我们可以写出下面这样的一个句子。
And so now you can see that we reduced from an original of 12 words to 7 words.
好，你会发现这样子的方式呢，使原本有12个字的句子变成7个字了。
So now let's take a look at our last two sentences. We have Annie is carving a pumpkin and Annie has a big knife.
好，我们再来看最后两个句子。
Right, and so if we combine these together, we get this word. Annie is carving a pumpkin with a big knife.
好，如果我们把这两个句子做个合并呢，我们会得到下面这个句子。Annie 呢，她用一把大的刀子在雕刻这个南瓜。
And so we only reduced from 10 words to 9 words, but we were able to make a connection between the knife and the pumpkin much clearer.
好，尽管我们只从10个字减少到9个字但是我们把刀子跟南瓜这两个字的关系表现得更清楚了。
And so we can see this new sentence, this puts emphasis on why the knife is important.
好，那这个句子呢，它把重点放在刀子上面，告诉我们说刀子为什么是很重要的。
All right, so now let's take a look at the 3 sentences that we ended up with.
好，我们先来看一下我们刚刚所写出来的3个句子。
Right, now let's say that we want to put emphasis on the fact that Annie is a pretty young blonde woman.
好，我们现在假设呢，我们想把整个句子的重点放在第一句，也就是 Annie 是个漂亮年轻的金发女孩这句子上面。
So then we can combine these 3 sentences together in this way. And we have Annie is a pretty young blonde woman who is wearing a black witch's costume and carving a pumpkin with a big knife.
好，那如果照我们刚刚的假设呢，我们可以写出这样的一个句子。
And so we can see here that the important information is Annie is a pretty young blonde woman because it's an independent clause, and all the other information is in a dependent clause, so it's not as important.
好，我们会发现呢，在这样一个句子里面呢，Annie is pretty young blonde woman 是最重要的因为它是以一个独立子句的形式来呈现。那后半段的句子都没有前面这个句子这么重要，是因为后面的句子都以一个从属子句的方式来呈现。
Right, then we can also see that this sentence is much more efficient than our original 8 sentences. And you can see that we had 35 original words in our 8 sentences, and now we only have 22 words in this sentence.
好，你会发现这样的一个句子比原本有8个句子读起来的有效率多了。而且呢，原本我们总共有35个字，现在呢，我们只剩下22个字了。
Right, now let's take a look at a different way of combining these sentences together.
好，我们来看看要用其他的方式来合并这3个句子。
All right, we have another sentence. This sentence says, Annie, a pretty young blonde woman, is wearing a black witch's costume and carving a pumpkin with a big knife.
好，我们看到下一个句子的写法是像现在这个荧幕上这个样子。
Now, this new sentence puts emphasis on the fact that Annie is wearing a witch's costume and carving a pumpkin.
好，这样一个新的句子呢，它的重点是放在句子的后半部哦，也就是说 Annie 穿着黑色的女巫服哦，那用一把刀子在切割这个南瓜。
And also we can see that this new sentence only takes 20 words.
好，我们会发现这个新的句子只要20个字。
All right, and so now you've seen some different ways that we can combine sentences together in order to make our writing more efficient and to also change the emphasis of the sentences that we write.
好，那从刚刚的例子呢，我们可以发现哦，这样子合并句子可以帮助我们的写作更有效率，而且呢，同时我们也可以利用合并句子的方式呢，来改变我们句子中所想强调的重点。
All right, let's take a little break now, and we'll be back in just a few moments.
好，我们现在先休息一下，等一下再继续回来。
Okay, so our writing model is about parking, so let's find out the opinions of a person who lives in Taipei about the parking situation here.
好，我们的这个写作范例呢，讲述的是关于一个停车的议题哦。让我们来看看呢，这个台北市民对于停车这件事情的意见。
All right, so let's watch Teresa interview somebody now.
好，我们首先先来看看 Teresa 访问一位台北市民的一个过程哦。
Hi, what's your name?
My name's Jody.
Hi, Jody. Do you drive by your own?
Yes, I drive every day.
So, what do you think of the parking situation in Taipei?
Well, to me, it wasn't a problem because I always park at private parking.
对他来讲似乎不太难，因为他都停付费的停车场。So, do you have any tips on finding the parking space in Taipei?
Well, the parking tips, I would say you just need to be more patient when you try to find a free parking.
OK， 所以只要多点耐心，你就可以找到停车位了。Thank you, Jody.
Thank you.
Hi, what's your name?
Hi, 我是 John.
Hi, John. Do you drive?
我有开车。
Good. What do you think of the parking situation in Taipei?
台北其实不太好停车，因为车子太多了。
He said it's so hard to find a parking space in Taipei because there are so many cars on the streets. Do you have any tips on finding a parking space in Taipei?
我的方式是在附近的巷子多绕个几圈，然后看看有没有空的车位可以停。
He said he would take a few spins in small alleys and try to see if there are any parking space. Thank you, John.
谢谢。
Hi, what's your name?
我叫哈娜。
Hi, Hannah. Do you drive?
我本身自己就有开车。
Okay, so what do you think of the parking situation in Taipei?
可能就是早一点出门，然后也许好一点的话，找到好的位置，但是车子却停不下。
She says she will leave earlier to find a parking space, but sometimes when she finds it, the car can't even fit into the space. So do you have any tips on finding a parking space in Taipei?
最后的选择的话，就找公共停车场，或者是就选择付费。
She would better just pay for the public parking lot. Thank you, Hannah.
You're welcome.
So we can see that there are some people and they have some very different opinions on what parking is like in Taipei.
好，我们可以从刚刚这段访谈中面看到呢，有这不同的人呢，大家对于台北的停车这个议题有很多不同的意见。
Now what we're going to do is take a look at the writing model and see if what it says about parking is similar or different to what these people said.
好，我们接下来呢，我们来看一下我们的这写作范例哦。这写作范例里面的内容呢，和刚刚这三位受访者的这个意见呢，其实是蛮类似的。
Right, so now let's start taking a look at the first sentences in the writing model, and we're going to combine these three sentences together.
好，首先我们先来看一下这第一个句子哦。那我们等一下会把这些句子合并起来。
All right, our first sentence is, "It is very hard to find a parking spot in the city."
第一个句子，在城市中要找到停车位是非常不容易的。
Sentence 2, "There are so many cars."
第二个句子，这里有这么多的车子。
Sentence 3, "There are so few parking spots."
第三个句子，这里只有少量的停车位。
Right, so now when we combine these sentences together, we need to determine what relationship exists between the sentences. And so we can see in these three sentences that there's a cause and effect relationship.
好，当我们要开始合并句子之前呢，首先要先确定这些句子间存在着什么样的关系。在句子第一、第二、第三之中呢，它们存在着所谓的因果关系。
And so we can see that sentences 2 and 3 are the cause, and sentence 1 tells the effect or the consequences of the cause.
好，我们可以发现例句2跟例句3哦是原因，例句1呢则说出了这个原因所造成的结果。
And so to show a cause and effect relationship, we can combine these sentences together in a number of different ways, and the final sentence that we decide on using will be determined by the emphasis that we're trying to make.
好，为了表示这个因果关系呢，我们有很多的办法来合并这3个句子。哪一个句子会成为最后一个句子呢？就会根据我们所想要强调的重点为何来做决定。
Right, now first what we can do is we can combine sentences 2 and 3 together by making a compound sentence.
好，首先呢，我们先把例句2跟例句3合并在一起哦，借由使用这个复合句的方式。
And so a compound sentence has 2 independent clauses.
好，复合句呢，指的就是包含2个独立子句的句子。
And so we can combine these 2 independent clauses together with a coordinating conjunction.
好，我们会借由使用对等连接词的方式来连接2个独立的子句。
Right, and so what we can end up with is this sentence: there are so many cars, and there are so few parking spots.
好，那我们因此可以得到以下的这个句子哦，就说这里有这么多的车子，但是只有这么少的停车位。
And by writing a compound sentence, we show that so many cars and so few parking spots are equally important in this sentence.
好，借由这个复合句的写出来呢，我们会发现说，很多的车子跟很少的停车位，它们的重要性是一样的。
So now let's combine this sentence with our first sentence.
好，我们接下来把这个句子和我们刚刚的第一个句子做连接。
And so, for example, we can make sentence 1 into an independent clause, and then we can make sentence 2 into an adverb clause by adding because before it.
好，我们可以把句子1变成独立子句，那我们也可以借由加上 because 在句前的方式呢，把例句2变成副词子句。
And so here's our new sentence that we can make by combining everything together. We have, it is very hard to find a parking spot in the city because there are so many cars and there are so few parking spots.
好，那接着呢，我们就可以把这3个句子合并在一起，就会得到现在看到的这个句子。
And so here we can also see in this sentence there's more emphasis on very hard to find a parking spot because it appears at the beginning of the sentence.
好，我们会发现呢，这个地方讲到的重点是很难去找到车位哦，因为这个句子是放在整个句子的最前面。
And also, this is stronger. This is more important because it appears in an independent clause and not in the dependent clause.
好，那我们也可以发现这个句子是特别的重要哦，因为它是以一个独立子句的方式出现，而不是像后面的句子是一个从属子句的方式。
Right, let's take a look at another kind of sentence that we can make, and we're going to show cause and effect by just using a compound sentence.
好，我们现在来看看另外一个例子啊，我们用到这个因果关系的方式呢，来写出一个复合句。
And so this is our new sentence. There are so many cars, and there are so few parking spots. So it is very hard to find a parking spot in the city.
好，那我们可以用另外一个方式来表达同样的意思啊。那我们这次使用的是 so， 你可以像这个句子里面看到的一样。
And so we can see here, many cars, so few parking spots, and hard to find parking are all appearing in independent clauses. So these 3 ideas are equally important.
好，你会发现在这个新的句子里面呢 ，many cars， few parking spot， 跟这个 very hard to find a parking spot， 这3个重点呢，是一样重要的，因为它们都是以独立子句的方式出现。
All right, let's show you another way of combining these sentences together. And now we're going to use some dependent clauses at the beginning of our sentence.
好，那我们接下来呢，再用另外一种方式来表达合并句子啊。我们现在要使用的方式是利用从属子句的方式。
All right, and so we have this sentence. Since there are so many cars and there are so few parking spots, it's very hard to find a parking spot in the city.
好，我们看到这样一个句子呢，他说啊，既然啊我们有这么多的车子，却只有这么少的车位，哦，要找到在城市里面要找到一个停车位是非常困难的。
All right, and then we also have D. In sentence D, it's practically the same except we use because at the beginning.
好，那我们看到另外一个这个ED 的这个句子啊，他们看这前面上面的 EC 的句子啊，几乎是一样的哦，因为他们两个都是以这个从属子句作为开头。
And so we can see both of these sentences uses dependent clauses at the beginning of the sentence. They seem a little bit less direct or less clear. And so I would actually not suggest using dependent clauses to begin an essay.
好，我们可以发现呢，这两个句子哦，就像我们刚刚说的，都以从属子句作为开头，所以他们的感觉呢，没有像之前的句子这么样的直接。那我们会建议说呢，哦，像这样的句子，我们可以把它用这个放在这句首段落的头尾来做开头的话呢，会把气势显得比较弱。
And so in conclusion, sentence 1A, the first sentence that we made, is our best sentence. Let's take a look at sentence 1 again, 1A again.
好，那我们会发现呢，刚刚这些句子里面哦，最好的一个用法呢，应该是我们刚刚第一个造出来的 1A 这个句子。那我们再看一下 1A 的句子。
All right, but what we want to do is make it a little bit more efficient by getting rid of some words that we don't need.
好，那我们现在要做的事情呢，我们就是把一些把这个 1A 这个句子变得更完善哦。那我们把一些多余的字来做删除。
And so actually what we can do is we can get rid of there are. We don't have to repeat there are 2 times.
好，首先我们可以改善的方式呢，是把这个 there are 做一些修正哦。我们并不需要让它出现2次。
And so then we can end up this sentence 1E as our final sentence.
好，那因此我们可以得到 1E 这个句子哦，当做我们最后一个完整的一个句子。
All right, let's take a little bit of a break now, and we'll be back with you in just a few moments.
好，我们先休息一下，待会儿再回来。
Welcome back. Let's continue combining together the sentences in the writing model.
好，欢迎各位同学回来。我们现在要继续呢，把刚刚的写作范例里面其他的句子做个合并。
Now let's take a look at sentences 4 and 5.
好，我们现在来看句子4跟句子5。
4, some people go to work very early.
好，句子4说呢，有些人很早的时候就去工作了。
5, they can find a parking spot before other people leave for work.
好，所以他们在其他人到达办公室前呢，就先找到车位。
So sentence 5 explains the reason why the action in sentence 4 occurs.
好，我们可以发现句子5它解释了句子4发生的原因。
And so if we want to keep these 2 sentences at about the same level of importance, we can use a conjunction to combine the sentences.
如果我们希望这2个句子看起来是一样的重要，我们可以使用连接词来合并这2个句子。
And so then we end up with this sentence. Some people go to work very early so they can find a parking spot before other people leave for work.
好，那我们因此得到了现在这个句子哦。他说呢，有些人很早就去上班，所以他们在其他人到达办公室前就先找到车位。
Now let's take a look at sentences 6 and 7.
好，我们现在来看一下例句6跟例句7。
Sentence 7 gives more information about the parking spot in sentence 6.
好，我们可以发现例句6呢，就提供了更多关于这个停车位的一些资讯。
And so therefore the main part of the sentence should consist of the information in sentence 6.
好，我们会发现呢，这个句子7呢，它也补充了一些句子6中所提到的一些资讯。
And so we can combine these together using an adjective clause.
好，我们可以把这2个句子做个合并利用形容词子句的方式。
Now, adjective clauses will give you more information about the noun in the sentence.
好，形容词子句呢，会提供这个句中这名词更多的资讯。
All right, and so if you have 2 sentences and they both have a common noun, you can combine them together by turning one of the sentences into an adjective clause.
好，如果呢你有2个句子它们有一个共通的名词，那你可以借由把其中的一个句子变成形容词子句，用这样的方式来连接2个句子。
And so now if we look back at sentences 6 and 7 again, we can see that both of them contain the words parking spot.
好，我们如果再回到刚刚的这2个句子例句6、例句7，你会发现 parking spot 重复了2次了。
And so since we don't need to repeat parking spot twice, we can change parking spot in sentence 7 into a word such as that or which.
好，那既然我们并不需要重复2次的这个 parking spot， 那我们可以使用的方式呢，我们把例句7前面这 parking spot 的地方删除，那我们再把它加上 that 或者是其他的方式来变成形容词子句。
And so now this means that we've turned sentence 7 into an adjective clause, and now we can combine it with sentence 6 by adding it on after the word parking spot.
好，那我们可以把例句6、例句7做个合并让它以例句7以形容词子句的方式来呈现。
And this is our sentence. Other people pay high rental fees for a parking spot that is near their office.
好，那这个句子呢，他说有些人则是付出高额的租金来租用办公室附近的停车位。
All right, let's take a look at our next group of sentences.
好，我们来看下一组的句子。
All right, we have 8. Sometimes you see cars.
好，我们看到例句8，有时候你看见车子。
The cars are driving around the block again and again.
好，例句9，车子在巷弄间穿梭来回穿梭。
And 10, they are looking for a parking spot.
他们在找寻着停车位。
So in this group, sentences 9 and 10, they both modify the word cars in sentence 8.
好，我们可以发现例句9、例句10都在帮例句8的 car 做一些这个修饰。
And so what we're going to do is we're going to use sentence 8 as our base sentence. We're going to add sentence 9 as an adjective clause and sentence 10 as a present participle phrase.
好，那我们现在呢，我们利用例句8来当做基准，再加上例句9当做形容词子句，再把例句10当做现在分词片语。
And so this is our sentence. Sometimes you see cars which are driving around the block again and again looking for a parking spot.
好，那我们就会得到你现在看到的这个句子他说呢，有时候你会看到车子在街区之间来来回回寻找车位。
And so you can see in this sentence we're using the participle phrase to explain why the cars are going around the block again and again.
好，我们现在在这个句子之中呢，我们使用分词片语用来解释为什么这汽车要在街区里面来来回回的原因。
All right, now let's take a look at our next sentences, 11 and 12.
好，我们来看下2个句子，第11句跟第12句。
And we see that these two sentences are setting up a condition.
好，这第11句跟第12句呢，其实是在设定一个一个状况。
So we're going to combine them together using the word if, and we end up with this sentence. If the driver is lucky, he will get a parking spot right away.
好，那所以呢，为了要显示这是一个状况的设定我们用 if 来作为2个合并句的开头，那我们就得到这个句子如果驾驶幸运的话，他可能马上就会找到车位。
All right, let's quickly look at our next sentences. We combine 13 and 14 together, we end up with this sentence. But other drivers must search for a long time and they still cannot find a parking spot.
好，我们把例句13、例句14做个合并那我们会得到下面这个句子。但是其他的驾驶必须要花很长的时间来寻找，却经常无功而返。
All right, and we'll just take a look at one more set. And if we combine sentences 15, 16, and 17 together, we end up with this sentence: people get their cars and leave for home.
好。那我们把第15句、第16句、第17句做一个结合之后，我们得到下面这个句子表示着当工作的一天结束了人们会开着车回家。
All right, let's just review very quickly what sentence combining does. It's a way that we can make our writing more efficient and we can change the emphasis of our writing.
好，我们再回顾一下，我们知道这个合并句子呢，就是为了要让句子看起来更重点能够改变那我们也可以让写作更加的有效率。
All right, thanks for joining us with English composition today. We'll be back again next week.
谢谢各位同学的参与，我们下周再见。
华视8点，古装精致大戏，